Happy Wednesday. But it needs a happy Wednesday. It's right in the middle of the week. It's a good time for a good Wednesday, isn't it? Let's see, I'm trying to think if there's any, is there anything I'm supposed to be announcing? Potluck. Good night. Shame on me. Potluck. Now, I've got kind of something else on my mind too, and that school's going to be starting. When does school start back? You know, Adrian, when school starts back?
It starts on the 8th.
On the 8th. I don't have my phone on me. How far is that from right now? Is that a couple of weeks?
The 8th is a Tuesday.
That's 2 weeks. Kind of kicking around the idea of having an ice cream social, right? I mean, it's a good time for that. Maybe not the night before the first day of school. That might be catastrophic, but I'm going to be ironing those days out between now and Sunday, and we're going to try to some of you guys make really good ice cream. It's been a while since we've done that, and it's been way too long. So we're going to put something like that together, kind of a kickoff back to the school year, pray over our students kind of thing, and then the rest of us rejoice that we're not the ones going back. Yeah. Okay, we are in 2 Samuel chapter 10. Back in chapter 7, we get this major covenant. It reverberates throughout all of Scripture, through the New Testament as well, and that is the Davidic covenant. It's a covenant that God makes with David. Through his lineage, there is going to be a Messiah. The Christ is going to come through him. He's going to have an eternal throne. God is going to promise or covenant protection for David. He's going to make him a great name, a great nation, similar to the Abrahamic covenant. Now keep in mind, the Davidic covenant is part of the fulfilling of the Abrahamic covenant from all the way back in Genesis 12. And so when God makes a promise, he keeps them. Now, some of these things have played out over the course of centuries, but here in Samuel, 2 Samuel, right away we see in chapter 8, our author starts showing how God is keeping covenant. David is being victorious in battle. Now, before that, we would say God has anointed David through Samuel, the prophet, to be king, and it's taken years for that to happen, right? But throughout this time of exile, David is running from King Saul. God's hand is continually on him. Everything David is doing is being blessed, and it's just been that way so far. So in chapter 8, we see God giving David great victories, military. We see in chapter 9, David's, his compassionate side. He's looking for an heir of Saul that he may show him kindness, and he does. The only one that he finds is Mephibosheth. It is the son of Jonathan that was wounded as an infant, and his feet were crippled. David is going to bring him into the king's house, going to eat at the king's table. He's going to take care of him. He's given him back all the land that Saul had. He's appointed Mephibosheth's servants to take care of the land, to grow produce from it. The proceeds are going to go to Mephibosheth. He's not going to have need of anything because he's staying with the king, but he is allowing Mephibosheth to grow his own wealth. In case something happens to David, he'll be taken care of. So things are great, right? Everything is looking good. David's got his capital built there in Jerusalem. He's living there now. He's got the kingly palace built. He's got his house built. He's established Jerusalem as a center of worship. He's moved the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. Jerusalem is now growing to this, we actually think of it. It's becoming the center of Israel, isn't it? And so here in chapter 10, we're going to get back to something that David is most famous for, and that is war. We think about kings of Israel and war. David is going to be the first king that kind of comes to mind. He has got his fair share of battles in already, and that's not going to stop anytime soon. But we're going to still see yet in this chapter God keeping covenant, both David and Abraham. All right, so we'll jump right onto the text and just, we'll read a bit. After this, and this is after Mephibosheth is brought into the king's house. After this, the king of the Ammonites died, and Hanun, his son, reigned in his place. And David said, I will deal loyally with Hanun, the son of Nahash, as his father dealt loyally with me. And so David sent by his servants to console him concerning his father. David's servants came into the land of the Ammonites. We'll pause there right there. When David was a fugitive running from Saul, David went to Ammon, and the king was generous with him. They established a treaty as such. It's not like we understand a suzerain treaty. It's not where the king of Ammon has made David some sort of vassal, or he's got David indebted to him or anything, but it was the king showing David kindness, giving him refuge, and so it's been a great relationship between David and Ammon. And so David is going to go and try to extend that relationship to the son as well. That's the point of this meeting, and David sending diplomats, as it were, to the king of Ammon. But the princes of the Ammonites said to Hanun, their lord, do you think, because David has sent comforters to you, that he is honoring your father? Has not David sent his servants to you to search the city, to spy it out, and to overthrow it? So right away we see that the son of Nahash, Hanun here, has got bad friends, right? He's surrounded himself with the wrong kind of people. So they've planted some seeds of dissension in his mind. He's, David's spying out. He's looking for his next conquest right here. The treaty he had with Dad, that's not gonna, it's not gonna play out here. So rather than listen to what the servants say and have discourse with David, he just reacts very immaturely. So Hanun took David's servants and shaved off half the beard of each and cut off their garments in the middle at their hips and sent them away. And when it was told David, he sent to meet them, for the men were greatly ashamed. The king said, remain at Jericho until your beards have grown, and then return. Okay, so we have something much greater than a slap in the face or even a throwing down of the gauntlet. This is worse. Symbolically, shaving off half the beard. Now, in your mind's eye, how does that look to you? Did he leave him a mustache and all the rest is gone? Did he shave the mustache, leave everything else, or did he? That's kind of how I see it. I see it from, right to left. That's gone. They got half a beard. And so the symbolism is the king here has insulted King David's masculinity, his virility. One of these days, probably we get into Corinthians, we'll talk about some of their views of reproduction and vitality and virility and things like that. But the short story is that they believe that a man's masculinity was produced, by the hair that grew on his body. The hairier the guy was, the more fertile, more strong, more masculine he was. Say if you were Sasquatch, you would have been the prime candidate for masculinity back then, all right? So shaving off half their face and then cutting the garments off at the hips, so you can kind of get what's happening here, right? Sending them back to David naked from the waist down. And so this is basically Hanun here, the diplomat is a representative of King David. And so it's expected that the diplomats would be treated with the same kind of respect that you would treat the king. So what's happening here is the king is basically turning David into a eunuch. That's how this would be understood. He's removing David's masculinity. And so that's exactly the sort of image that David is going to get from this when he finds out what was done to his servants that he'd sent to Ammon. David finds out about it. Of course, the men are greatly ashamed, right? It'd be pretty embarrassing. Half a beard, naked from the waist down. Remain at Jericho until your beards have grown and then return. He's going to allow them to retain as much dignity as possible. You just hide out over here till your hair grows back on your face. I'm assuming he probably bought them a new robe, for each, whatever. They're gonna be dressed and hang out at Jericho until they can return to their normal status, right? Verse 6, when the Ammonites saw that they had become a stench to David, the Ammonites sent and hired the Syrians of Rehob, and the Syrians of Zobah, 20,000 foot soldiers, and the king of Maacah with 1,000 men, and the men of Tob 12,000 men. All right, so I'm not sure exactly what the Ammonites thought were going to happen, right? But you read it and you're like, were they surprised that they became a stench to David? However, the author doesn't allow that David had started gathering a military force yet to retaliate for the treatment of his servants. Now, the David of old, the one that was insulted by, what was Abigail's husband's name? Can't think of his name now off the top of my head. I lost it. Nob, yeah, something like that. He'd have been all over him back then, right? He'd have probably left Jericho, headed straight across the creek over to Ammon and started clearing house. Right? That's not the impression we get of this more mature, slightly older David, right? We don't get that. We don't get that picture. He's not got his guns drawn, so to speak, just yet. However, when David heard of it, Ammon's gathering military force, right? They're pulling in. They're trying to find some folks to come help. And so David hears of this. That's when David begins to, all right, we're going to get the military involved. David heard of it. He sent Joab and all the host of his mighty men. The Ammonites came out and drew up in battle array at the entrance of the gate, and the Syrians of Zobah and Rehob and the men of Tob and Maacah, they were by themselves in the open country. So if you're keeping up with this in your mind's eye, you've got the opposition is in two forces. One's at the gate of the city. The other one is in the open country. We got two groups ready and waiting on the army of Israel to show up. So we got a map. And I found my pointer. We have the orange area here, which is just roughly Syria. Okay? Got Ammon way down here, just kind of off the north end of the Dead Sea, and that's kind of the area we generally associate with. They'll be outside of the city of Rabbah, the capital city of Ammon. So this is where they're all drawing up to fight. It's right out here. Got the Ammonites at the gates of the city. Got the different cities of Tob and the others that come down. Zobah that's come down to fight with Ammon. So they're gathered. They've got two forces, and they're going to try to sandwich, or they're going to try to push the army of Israel into a gap and attack them. Try to get a strategic advantage. Joab saw that the battle was set against him from both in front and in the rear. He chose some of the best men of Israel and arrayed them against the Syrians. And the rest of his men he put in the charge of Abishai, his brother, and he arrayed them against the Ammonites. So he's went through, he's chosen some of the guys, and he's going to set one group against Syrians, the other group against the Ammonites. And so this single force has now been divided. Probably not the circumstance that Joab was hoping for or looking to get into, but it is, as they say, what it is. He's going to work with what he's got. Verse 11, he said, if the Syrians are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I'll come and help you. So they're going to look out for one another, right? They see one side starting to lose or give ground. Well, the other side will help. I don't know what the plan is if both sides are losing, but evidently they're not thinking like that. But verse 12 is kind of the linchpin of the battle, right? This is what connects us back to chapter 7. This is the key passage. Be of good courage, and let us be courageous for our people and for the cities of our God, and may the Lord do what seems good to him. This is Joab putting his trust in the God of Israel, and he uses the personal name. He uses Yahweh here. Capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. I don't know that we've seen him do that so far. But here he is. He is the general of the army of Israel. David's leader, right? And he is talking about the God of Israel. We are in the midst of covenant keeping. Verse 13, so Joab and the people who were with him drew near to battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. And when the Ammonites saw that the Syrians fled, they likewise fled before Abishai and entered the city. Joab returned from fighting against the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem. That's a pretty short synopsis right there. Isn't it? 2 verses. Joab and his group pulled near the Syrians, they fled. The Ammonites said, we hired these guys to come in to be our muscle, and they're hauling tail back to Syria. We're going back inside and getting inside our fortified city before it gets too bad. Isn't that that's kind of how that worked? And so Israel is victorious. Syria is set on their heels running, and the Ammonites are forced back into their city. The Syrians saw that they had been defeated by Israel. They gathered themselves together. And Hadadezer sent and brought out the Syrians who were beyond the Euphrates. And they came to Helam, Shobach, the commander of the army of Hadadezer, at their head. And so we have, Syria is going to grow. They're going to be a lot bigger in another couple of centuries, right? They're going to grow. They're eventually going to carry Israel, the northern kingdom, into captivity. They're not quite there yet, but they're in the process of trying to grow their control, their power, right? So they've got a contingent of soldiers all fighting on what we know as Babylon, over around the Euphrates, between the 2 rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates. They're fighting over there. They're going to say, hey, we've got a problem here. And the problem is going to be a cash flow problem. Because David, if you remember back in chapter 8, has already defeated the Syrians a time or two. And David has grown the kingdom a little bigger than what Saul had, and David has gained control of some key travel routes. King's Highway that comes up the coast and cuts through the Jezreel Valley. David now controls that. I can't remember the other one, but there's another one that cuts through close to Jerusalem, another one that goes around the south end of the Dead Sea and up the Transjordan. And right now, David has them all. Effectively, David can close off all trade going towards Syria from Egypt. And that's one of the reasons Israel has been so popular over the centuries and over the millennia, actually, and even to today, is because of these trade routes. They're the only way Egypt can ship goods. If something's coming out of North Africa and it needs to go to Asia Minor, if it needs to go back east, it's got to pass through Israel. Whoever controls Israel, whoever controls those trade routes, controls the money. And right now, David does, and Syria can't have that. No more than Egypt can. Egypt, the two continually fight over control of Israel and the Jezreel Valley just to maintain control of the trade route. So, Syria has got to retaliate. They've got to regain some kind of control because they need to be able to move trade. They've got to be able to move goods, right? Keep money coming in, keep goods coming in. It's got to happen. And so, we have Hadadezer. My computer pronouncer says that Hadadezer. How you guys say it? Y'all say it differently than that? I'm trying to think. I don't know if I've ever heard it any different than that. Sounds good to you? Good. We don't know any better, do we? We'll just leave it at that. Hadadezer. Shobach. The commander sent, we're going to gather up our troops, we're going to make a push, we're going to take a bigger force, we're going to go meet David, or we're going to go reclaim some ground. Verse 17, when it was told David, he gathered all Israel together and crossed the Jordan, came to Helam. The Syrians arrayed themselves against David and fought with him. And you guys, I was on a kick here I think it was during COVID. Of course, there's not a whole lot to do during that time. And I was watching everything on World War II I could get. I was pulling up documentaries on YouTube, renting movies and what have you, watching all these historical battles and listening to the narrator teach me through the cause and effect of things that happened. I wish I could remember some of it. A lot of that took place, late at night, wee hours in the morning when I couldn't sleep kind of thing. But if you're looking for details about how these battles took place and the strategies, what are they doing, we don't get that, right? One, not really that kind of history. It's about what God's doing with Israel, right? We just see they gathered all Israel together, they crossed Jordan, came to Helam, and they arrayed themselves against David, fought with him. Pretty about as bare bones as you can get to a description of what's happening. The Syrians fled before Israel. David killed of the Syrians the men of 700 chariots, 40,000 horsemen, and wounded Shobach, the commander of their army, so that he died there. About as much detail as you get. We don't know about the give and take of the battle. We don't know how long it lasted. We don't know about the geography, how they spread out, what did they do. We don't know about tactics. This is what happened. They met up, they fought, they lost. And here's kind of what happened. Here's how many had fallen there were. Which is okay. All those other details is not for everybody. But God is keeping covenant, right? This is very significant. Verse 19, all the kings who were servants of Hadadezer saw that they had been defeated by Israel. They made peace with Israel and became subject to them. And so the Syrians were afraid to save the Ammonites anymore. This is a huge reversal, right? Now Syria is already needing to regain some control in the area. And so they call up all the vassals of the area, all these little city-states like Hatzor and Tob and all these places where we have armies, militias, they have men of valor, so to speak, like David, and they're under their control. These cities and these kings, they're paying tribute to Syria. When Syria comes calling, y'all come out and fight with us, they have to go or Syria's going to come annihilate them. So here, Israel and David and his armies, they come and defeat Syria, and not only do they defeat them, but they receive a lot of those vassals, those city-states that had been forced to be loyal to Syria are now vassals to Israel. That's huge. Now Syria didn't just lose a little bit of landmass, they lost cities, they lost income, they lost possible inroads into Israel. This is huge, politically speaking, financially speaking. This is huge. This is crippling, right? And so, long story short, David is growing the kingdom with, of course, the help of God. God giving victory through battles and such. Israel is growing. Now, I've got a couple maps up here, and I found, probably 4 or 5 maps of Israel that kind of show what the kingdom looked like under the reign of Saul versus the expansion of David through military battle, things like that. This particular map, the blue in the middle, that would represent King Saul's control, area that was under King Saul's control. And the green is what David has added, right? And that is one map. We still see the Philistines area over here. It's still shaded in pink. They maintain control of, compared to the rest of it, it doesn't look like much, but it is the coastal plain. It is the front end of the King's Highway before it crosses back through the Jezreel Valley up here. You got the Sidonians up here, Tyre and Sidon. We had the king of Tyre, wasn't it, that sent the lumber, the trees of Lebanon, the cedar of Lebanon to David to help build his palace here just a few chapters back. And so they're colored white still, and they may be considered vassals, but if nothing else, they are at least at peace with Israel. They are in a status of treaty anyway. Now, this other map shows it a little bit differently, and to me, I think this one is a little more accurate. So it doesn't necessarily show a huge difference, Most of the difference you see is some of the land up and down through here, which gets you into the Mount Carmel range and all that they would claim that David has gained control over. And so we have Saul, as the purple. That would be his kingdom. You see a lot of his is over here in Gilead and all that. That's because he came over. One of his first military things he did as king was to come over here and liberate Jabesh Gilead over in here. So Saul got really popular and gained a lot of control. David, his expansion gets way up now. We got Zobah up here, which he's defeated twice now. Tob down around here in this area. And as far into the desert as he wants to go, because over here east of the Transjordan, you're not going very far, and it's inhospitable and inhabitable desert all the way back towards the Euphrates. All the travel goes up and over and around the desert, because there's only a few that want to go out there. And there were a few spice trade routes that went through the desert, but those nomads, they were tough as nails. That's kind of how they're known. So here in this image, and one reason I like this is because here in the reign of David and on into the reign of Solomon, we see the land control of Israel grow to the biggest that it's ever been, and it's as close to the fulfilling of the Abrahamic covenant of land that we see in the text of Scripture. The borders extending from the river of Egypt, and I'll just point down here to this one down here, from here all the way up to, I don't remember the name of the northern city that is listed, but you remember, it's fairly extensive, but under the rule of David, and rather quick, between chapter 8 and 10 here, Israel's land holdings has grown tremendously. So God is keeping covenant with David. That's the main point that our author is getting across to us at this particular point. God has made a covenant, and let me show you how God has been keeping it with David. And so that's where we're at. We want to stop here in chapter 10. I could have actually sped through that a little better, but we're going to work on chapter 11 and 12 next week, because this is the David and Bathsheba episode. And so I want to be able to give that adequate time and attention and talk about that. Do you have any thoughts or questions about chapter 10? It's a fascinating chapter. Again, a lot of the stuff in here is covenant keeping and then political. But nevertheless, it's good stuff, interesting stuff. All right. Well, we'll pick up in chapter 11 then next week. This coming Sunday, I knew there was something else I was supposed to announce. Ralph is going to miss it. Unless that speaker back there is working. I don't think they're turned on. Next Sunday night, and we finished up Romans, and I'm not jumping right back into a book and a Bible study as such yet. I was going to preach a sermon series on heaven. But instead, what I want to do, because I want it to be interactive, I want to be able to talk about it. Next Sunday night, I'm going to talk about heaven a bit, but I want to ask you what you think about heaven. What are some of the understandings that you've had throughout your life, or you've kind of come to, when you think about heaven, what it's going to be like? I want to know what you think, questions that you may have about heaven, and I'm going to be typing them down or writing them down as you give them, because I want to make sure that they get addressed during this lesson series. But we're going to spend as much time as it takes. We're going to do a deep dive and study heaven. And believe it or not, it reaches all the way back to Genesis. The prophets even speak about it actually quite a bit. And there's so much about heaven that we really don't study. And over this last month and a half or so, I've learned so much more about heaven than I ever thought I needed to know that it's worth the time, it's worth the effort that we're going to put into it. But we're going to do a deep dive. We're going to study about it. There's a lot more to heaven than pearly gates, streets of gold, and a place where there's no crying, no pain, and no sickness. And so we're going to talk about that. But be thinking about some questions you have, and I'm going to ask some leading questions to try to get you talking. But we are definitely, I'm probably going to get the lectern and move it down there and make this as informal, a classy type situation on a Sunday night as we can, because I'm going to need you to talk. But we're going to talk about some things with heaven that I'm going to guess a good many of us have never even considered before. But we're going to do it from the text of Scripture.
Number 261. Y'all don't forget about potluck now. Oh, what about the pictures we still collected for?
I brought the screen back from Perrytown this evening. I'm going to have it set up for Sunday back